Anyway, good morning. How's everybody doing? Hopefully everybody's doing great. Welcome back to George's Grit and Lore. I've been kind of busy lately trying to get a new business going, trying to deal with unemployment problems and all the other fun stuff. Previous employer just cost me $6,000. I don't think we need to talk about them here. I don't need to be as petty as them. So where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about the Atlanteans and the Sumerians, and how I needed to talk about how the pyramids on the Earth, the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau, and the ones on Mars worked. Mars were the prototype, because I'm saying my theory is on that the pyramids on Mars were built by the Sumerians or the Nephilim, or whatever you want to call them, 70-foot tall people, billions and billions of years before the Earth they ever decided to make the Earth, and the Big Bang Theory and everything else is completely wrong. So let's talk about how the pyramids works. The pyramids were not only a water source. They would attract water because the smooth surface that was on the outside was a attractant. This gets into a whole lot of crazy stuff. The piece of metal on top, or the gold that was on top, was also weight, because it was a piezoelectric generator. A lot of people theorize that it sent electricity powered the planet. Well, powered up the civilization that they thought built it. Well, it was built, the pyramid on Earth was built, at least the one on Giza Plateau was built before the Earth had an atmosphere. It was just a big floating rock. In the space, the right space where they needed it. It was built by the 70-foot Nephilim or Atlanteans or Sumerians, whichever group you want to call them. They were all the above. The race was Nephilims, and they were 70-foot tall people. I have a photo someplace. I should put it up here, but I probably won't. I'll probably forget. But anyway, the pyramids were not only, they were a machine. It wasn't really built for anything else. It was built to terraform the planet or give the planet an atmosphere. And we all know, if you don't know, all the continents were one at one time. Over the years, they moved. That's how human beings got on all the continents, because they walked from continent to continent at the time, way before Jesus Christ was around. So, and then we can talk about evolution too, because that was not actually something that happened on this planet. That was a science experiment. But let's go back to the pyramids. We can talk about all that stuff. If you want to, just send me a message you want me to further elaborate on it. But the pyramids were not only a machine. It was a machine, but it was not only a water generator or a collector. Because if you go out in the desert and you put up a tarp or something smooth, or what they're talking about on the internet, a screen, and let the wind blow through it, you'll collect water. Hydrogen and oxygen will attach to it and become water droplets. Then you can get enough water to drink for the day. At some places you get more, some places you get less, but there is water in the air all the time. Now, I'm saying that the pyramids were a piezoelectric generator, were before the machine was no longer needed. And it was built, when they built it, they took 4 to 6 70-foot tall people to actually do it. So that would be easier for 2 people or 2 70-foot tall men to pick up one of those granite stone blocks and just walk it across the the field, their steps would have been bigger, so the 3 or 4 miles or 10 miles, whatever it was, wouldn't have been that big of a deal. That'd been like you and I walking across the parking lot at Home Depot. Wouldn't have been that far away, but the precision and everything else, modern science can't explain that, and it had to be precise because it's an 8-sided pyramid, not a 4-sided pyramid. And the two sides, one side's concave just a little bit, and the other side's pointed. That's the direction we spin. And then the king and queen's chambers that they talk about, one of them was the queen's chamber was a salt dispensing, because salt carries electricity better than salt water, carries electricity better than plain water. So that was a piezoelectric generator, and the tunnels and passages underneath were eventually filled with water. So when the pressure got on the granite and the metal or the gold capstone, all that worked together to generate power. As the moon come around, it would stretch and make it smaller. So over a period of time, you could generate enough static electricity or small bits of power to start the core of the earth going. Now, if you listen to Nikola Tesla, he says that everything's electricity, and he posited that the earth itself was a negative part of the equation, and the atmosphere was a positive. So if the earth is operating on a static electricity charge, then it's a self-sustaining perpetual motion machine. And people say those don't work, or you're standing on one. And then, you can, like everything else, everything on the earth, including you and me, is powered by electricity or DC power, generated by food and other plants and stuff that we work with. But the whole point of the idea is the Great Pyramids were built to serve a purpose. Then when they no longer serve their purpose, and then they just basically weren't maintained after a certain point in time, because the people who built it, the Nephilims, or a lot of even most of the modern day scientists with their religion think it was 1935 or something before Christ. Now that's a little off. It was built with the planet. It was actually the planet that built it. And the prototypes were on Mars because they were testing it up there. They call it the power station. All the little pyramids and the 2 big pyramids. Once we get up there and investigate them, they're the 2 big pyramids, or at least one of the big pyramids, is going to be set up exactly the same way as the one here on Earth if it was in one piece still. Which is kind of crazy, because when you think about it, it all lines up. So the Great Pyramids were left alone to work on this planet for roughly 20 million years or so. Then all the caveman species, I'm not going to go into what they were and all that, but they were science experiments. The gods, or the Nephilims, whichever way you want to look at it, or the Atlanteans, or the Sumerians, you can call them whatever you want. They were all the same group. It was basically Republicans, Democrats and Republicans at the time. One come from one planet, one come from another. They didn't like each other, and they fought all the time. They I lost my train of thought on that, but when they built the pyramid, they set it up so that it would over time pull water from the atmosphere or from the space with heat and a smooth surface to land on, because O2 and hydrogen are attracted to heat, which is why it condenses on your plants and whatever else you put out there at night. Natural way the world works, the way that works. And So it would condense the water, then the water would run down into the canals around the pyramid, and then run into the storage tanks or the thing below the Great Pyramid of Giza. I got to keep track on time. I got to go do another contract here at 11:45, so I got to watch that. So I keep looking at the clock. But they maybe I can get this explained by then. Then as it built up, the pyramid would come into its second function or third function, whichever way you want to look at it, or 15th function. It would start the minerals in the Queen chamber and the King's chamber, as we call it. They weren't coffins; they were just dispensers of minerals to get into the water to make it so that they could be more electrical transmitted, and they could put the minerals that the Nephilim, we'll just call them Nephilim because that was the whole race of giants, 70-foot tall giants. We'll just call them Nephilim. Anyway, so that was the whole thing they needed. And then when they decided to make humans in their image, which is critical, shortly after the planet decided to get an atmosphere, their first, 6? I don't know how many species, but I'm thinking there's 6 attempts. And then the 7th attempt was right there after all the cavemen or the hairy ape man. 7th attempt was Adam and Eve in the garden, male and female. And then the other group made another male, as far as I can tell from all the research that I've found. And that's where the human race started. And that was way before the Great Flood and Moses and all that, because that's even way before the dinosaurs were killed off. I haven't figured out the exact timeline, but I know it happened that way. But, this is all just science fiction, so we're just kind of just having fun at the moment, telling stories from something I dreamed up when I was driving truck for 33 years. But either way, the Adam and Eve was put there, and then they kind of started having kids and building the human race on, and then you get stories like David and Goliath and all that stuff. There's probably more in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the history books that were unpublished or not published or never found about this, but it's really interesting the way this is all unfolding, and explains just about everything that regular science can't explain. Then once that happened, because the home world for the Nephilim in this solar system was Mars, and we're going to get into how significant Mars was. Because we already talked about how the Nephilim decided to blow up their solar system with a bomb on another video. I'll link it. Or you can just find it. It's a big, interesting story on that one. I didn't do very long on that. I think it was like 16 minutes. But it gave the basic idea of what I was trying to lead into, and I was trying to do this in this series, 10 or 15 minute series, but I've decided I'm going to go a couple different directions with this channel once I finish this story. And we're going to talk about business more, what I've had, what my problems were, and all that. But I'll get back to the story that I'm trying to articulate here, and not doing a very good job of it. On Mars was the main colony of the Nephilim. They were having a full society up there. They actually had a moon, which is what they're calling the asteroid belt, and that was actually a moon. It was destroyed and blown up. I got represent photos that AI made. I'll put up here on the screen so that you can see it. Now, the Mars used to be a big blue planet, just like the Earth when it had its own moon. So the moon would have been roughly the same size um, as Earth is, or Earth's moon is to Earth, and they would have had a little bit better gravity on Mars because they had the moon moving water, keeping water above ground and all that stuff, just like it does on the Earth. Now, from everything that I can find, there was some kind of war between the colony here on Earth of the Nephilims and the war and Mars. I guess they were like England and the U.S. They had to pay taxes or something. People are people. History repeats itself. So I'm thinking that's what happened. And for whatever reason, they had a 0 point or some kind of nuclear weapon that was big and bad enough to blow up the moon on Mars instead of, just fighting back and forth with whatever weapons they were using between the planets. They fired a nuclear weapon, last-ditch effort to end the war, and blew up the moon of Mars, and some of it blew away out in the atmosphere, some of it landed here. But I'm figuring that moon was all ice, almost all ice, which falls into the story pretty good because then it explains the Great Flood. Because if the pyramid on Giza was doing its job and attracting water and making water and all that, all the water and debris would have rained down on this planet, and there would have been a lot of water in the solar system would have been attracted to the pyramid, which would have reinforced our atmosphere, and as water would hit our atmosphere, it would just melt, turn into steam, become part of the atmosphere, then rain down. Then that would explain the Noah's Ark. By then people were functioning around the area, and the pets and food of the Nephilim, the dinosaurs, were still on the planet. They would have survived it. They would have just run to higher ground just like everybody else, or like you would your dog, pick it up and put it in your ship and fly away until the water succeeds, forms the North and South Poles, ice packs. And they have found ice that is older than what they say the pyramids were made up on the North Pole. I think there was one found on the South Pole that did the same thing. But we'll go ahead and finish this whole story so that we can get this, and I'm going to give you lots to think about. Is it true? Is it not? We don't know. I don't know either. It's just a crazy story that I come up with, and I'm trying to get out so that I can move on to doing something else, so that I can get some more interest in this channel. And the interesting stuff in this channel seems to be what I did. Trucking was the most, and then I got the underground mob cities in town. But I'm going to start getting back into that kind of lore movies and talk about business and other stuff that I've got going on right now. Kind of keep this an up-to-date channel and see what it's going on. But it takes a lot of grit and lore for what the Nephilims and Atlanteans did, when they were alive. And then somewhere to prove this, even though science called it a fake and a hoax, somewhere in I think it was the 20s, in India, they found a 70-foot tall skeleton, which is hanging in the museum over there. They only found one. His foot was 15 feet tall. They showed a guy standing in front of it that his head was up to the ball of the foot, or ball of the foot, or bones. So, there's proof that the Nephilim existed. It's just mainstream science just wants to cover it up. Now, I could be totally off and wrong, and which would be fine. But the Great Pyramids on Giza and the ones on Mars didn't transmit power back and forth like everybody says. They were just power generation and water collection to turn the planet into They were just machines to turn the planet into a viable place for the Nephilim race to live. And then when they decided to make man in their own image, it worked out pretty good for them. We're not 70 foot tall no more. We were 10 foot tall. And yes, I understand that the burial grounds for the giants, I can't remember where they were, but they were 10 feet, 12 feet tall people that were buried 70 foot deep. That's not where I'm getting my 70 foot tall people from. I'm getting it from fringe science and other stuff and my imagination, because it all fits for me if we talk about it that way, all the things. So then we got God, or the Nephilim, which translates into God or human, depending upon which language you want to use to translate it. Then we've got all the caveman species right up till the human, which basically looks like the God, just instead of 70 foot tall, 6 to 8 foot tall, or 6 to 10 foot tall at the time. I'm sure they kind of worked a little more and got everybody around the same height, 6 foot, 4 to 6 foot tall. And then once they got all that, the Noah's Ark was built with instructions from the gods, because they had the technology to build basically a wooden bobber up on there. So when the floods came, they had all the animals that they created or were developed, on the earth for people to live with, which were different than the ones the Nephilims were living with, because they had the dinosaurs. Now I've got an AI image of what a Triceratops Rex would have looked with a 70 foot tall man. I'll put it up here someplace. Maybe I put it on the web other places, but I'll put it up here someplace too. That way you can get a good representation what I'm thinking and what I'm looking at, because a 70 foot tall giant would have been more than eye to eye, or a little taller than eye to eye with a Triceratops Rex. And if they would have treated them like we do dogs, that would have been a good pet. Workhorse. He could have put lots of weight on that big chicken with teeth. And then they could have run around all over doing all kinds of things. I don't think they were wild, or most of them were wild, and I think they used them for both pets and food. And I think that's what most of the dinosaurs were, just pets and food to the Nephilims. They probably brought them from their own planet, Mars or whatever, so they could have something to eat. Maybe they were just test subjects to see if the planet was viable for a air-breathing animal. We got all of ours that have been downsized, like chickens were downsized, and all the other animals that were downsized from dinosaurs. We've proven that. But they say evolution did it. I think it was scientists that did it. But, that's just my theory, my idea, my weirdness coming out. But it gave me something to think about when I was driving truck, and it kept me awake at night thinking about this. Talk to the AIs, and they don't believe that it's even true, but, what the heck. It's a fun story to talk about. And once we get this all finished, we can talk about it. And then maybe the Ice Age was just, after, I think, and I'm not sure how this fits in, but I think after the Nephilim left Mars, they sent an asteroid towards the Earth with calculations and all that, changed the direction of an asteroid. So in an effort to try to kill off the experiment that was on Earth in the Ice Age. And yes, human beings went through the Ice Age, just like it killed all the dinosaurs and probably some of the Nephilim too, or the giants, or the 70 foot tall people. But, mainstream scientists will never tell us if I'm right or not. But it doesn't really matter because it's all fun and games we're talking about here, and I'm having fun doing it. If you watch it, you watch it. If you don't, you don't. It's kind of one of those deals. But yeah, everything fits in. If you think about it, the Great Pyramid built the planet, just a big floating rock in space that was in the right orbit of the sun to build it. The Nephilim went ahead and built that, 8 to 10 guys that were 70 foot tall, or 12. And they moved all the stones. They built the pyramid with all those technologies that we're still discovering. Piezoelectricity, we've just recently discovered how that works. The gravity, the moon. And some people even think the moon came from the Grand Canyon. The volume matches, but somebody would have had to have some very big technology to be able to do that. Just scoop a whole bunch of stuff up from the Grand Canyon and put it out in space as the moon. And we know that the minerals and the content of the moon are basically the same as the Earth. And I tend to agree that the moon was part of the Earth at one time. So they can have their moon and keep the water above ground and have tidal forces working. Now, I've been wondering, and I asked AI, and I've been wondering what Mars would have looked like right now if it still had a moon, or if it had a moon. Just one moon. It doesn't need 3 or 4. I know we call the big rocks around the Mars now moons, but they're not actually moons. They're just big rocks floating around the Mars right at the moment, because they don't affect the tidal forces and gravity of the actual planet of Mars. As far as I know, the ice planet Pluto could have been part of the water loss from Mars, as the planet's ecosystem spun down to zero. I mean, the planet's still rotating. If it wasn't, didn't ever have a moon, it wouldn't have rotated. Figuring, that the moon helps generate the machine that kept the planet going. If they built the pyramids on Mars to get them going as power stations, get the thing turned into a planet, or keep it as a planet. And if they built them the same way they did the Great Pyramid on Giza, then, hundreds of billions of years, even further than that, it could be trillions of years before the Earth was ever thought about being formed. These 70-foot tall people could have had a colony on Mars. And it would have been, they would have never known the difference, because they would have just been running around building their society like we do. We don't really make a big deal out of our heights, because it really just all it is, except for modern women. But, that's a whole different conversation for a whole different channel. But everybody works together. We build a society. We make infrastructure and all that. I think that's exactly what happened on Mars with the 70-foot tall people doing it. And I think they had the same problem with men and women and left and right and people fighting amongst each other, because if they actually made human beings in their image as gods or Nephilim, depends upon which description you want to use, the Atlanteans, and when Atlantis fell, the whole solar system fell. But we talked about that in the other series. So it really seems like that's actually what happened. The more and more I think about it, and the more facts that are coming true, because they already say they found Noah's Ark. And all the scripture and all that stuff may have been put on there 19 whatever BC, because if you're building a machine, you're not going to take the time to scratch all that writings and inscription on there. Somebody else would have done it after the machine was abandoned or no longer needed, which would have been an interesting theory of the pyramids. Somebody else did it, and then, if people were around as the planet was getting speed up and was spinning, and in the billions of years to walk the planets in the early days of the planet's life, otherwise the continents would have been formed. And the theory of evolution and how people got on with modern science, it doesn't hold water. And my idea holds water better, but it's just an idea or a theory or just science fiction. So we can't really go out mainstream, because if the church people or anybody else really thought this, what I was saying was true, and I bet if we get popular on this channel and people start watching what I'm saying or listening to what I'm saying, they'll the mainstream scientists will try to prove it wrong or prove it right. But right now they're just going to blow me off as a crackpot, and we're going to let it be that way. But that's fine. It's just one or two videos, and we're going to change this format. I just had to get this out because it was something that I wanted to tell the public, and nobody would listen to me. I even wrote a paper and sent it to the Egyptology religious group over there, and I got an answer back, and I never did hear anything else about it. They buried it like they buried the 70-foot tall skeletons supposedly found in the Grand Canyon cave. But we can't prove that because we can't go over and put our fingers on it, especially if they covered it up and made it look like a regular wall. And there's people saying that in conspiracy theories. But what the hell? What if it's true? What if it's based on some kind of truth? Because all conspiracy theories are based on some kind of truth, just distorted. People telling each other over and over and over again. The story changes a little bit. If you don't know that, have you ever played the game telephone as a kid? Somebody says something on one end, it turns something different on the other. But we can discuss that if you want. Whatever you want to discuss about this, I'm more than welcome. You're more than welcome to bring it up in the comments. Not that anybody's going to watch this, but it's fun for this channel. So and then we can explain away most of the things that mainstream scientists just takes on faith. With this theory, if 70-foot tall scientists were trying to make man in their image, the caveman species, because if it was evolution for the caveman, there would be signs that of the change between the two species, or the species of the cavemen, but there is no signs. It just went from this type, then all of a sudden this type was here, then all of a sudden this type was here, then all of a sudden this type was here. And it goes on down the line that way. There's no signs in bones or science that it was actually evolution, because if it was evolution, it would have saw slow changes of that species, which we didn't see slow changes. They were sudden changes, according to mainstream science right now. So that's why I come up with the idea that it was the Nephilim, or science experiments. They got the size right, but they didn't get the look right, or the hairless ape right, and they probably made more mistakes than what we're seeing as far as science goes. That's probably where the actual apes come from, the chimpanzees, all that stuff come from, because they were probably earlier mistakes or later mistakes, or just because they wanted to do it, mistakes. Scientists get all kinds of weird about like stuff like that when they're doing it, and when they believe so strongly into doing it. And I think the ego and all the other stuff that our modern scientists have was the same thing the Nephilim had, because if we built in their image, then all the attitudes and the problems that human beings have would have been the same thing they have, just, on a larger scale. And mainstream science will tell you that a 70-foot tall human being is physically impossible. Well, no. Impossible is just somebody telling you that it's hard to do. Because we already know perpetual motion machines will work for a certain amount of time on Earth, but we also know we're standing on a perpetual motion machine that actually works. It's got a motor, it's got power, it generates its own power. It gets, then we're like plants in a bottle, or a whole system in a bottle. We're on this big globe, and we're just kind of running around oblivious to what's going on around us. And just like a lizard in a bottle with a bunch of plants, they used to do in the 30s in Germany. Take a glass watered bottle or milk bottle, clear one, put some dirt in the bottom, and then plant plants in it, and then drop a lizard or two in there, and then put some water in there, and then make it a sealed system and never touch it for another 30 years. And you've got lizards running around in there. They eat and live and have babies and fertilize the grass, and everybody symbiotic in there, and it all works. We're the same thing. And, we can get ideas and all kinds of stuff going on now. Which, show this to feminists, and show this video to the feminists, and it'll go crazy, because, I did a brief view on this just to get the idea out there. But, the way the theory works is the pyramids were built by the Nephilim, 70-foot tall people. And they were... they built it as a machine, not an ornament or a shrine to a king or queen. They built it as a machine. It wasn't a grave or anything like that. It was just a machine to build the planet going. And if you look at it from an engineering standpoint, all the stuff that we know about the pyramid, plus stuff that we're finding out about the pyramid, all fit into a machine designed for making a planet work. The machine's no longer needed. I mean, they could go over there and take that sucker completely to the ground, and it wouldn't make a difference now, because it's done its job billions of years ago when the planet was first formed. And if you do the carbon dating right, instead of carbon dating the hieroglyphics that are on it, or the writings, if they carbon dated the stone, it'll come up, of course, older than the planet, because it was on the planet, or on the rock before it was a planet. The carbon dating, I'm saying is wrong too. I know how carbon dating works, but also if they just scrape the surface, they could have got debris and dust and whatever else from the period that they carbon dated when they think the pyramid was built, which was when the hieroglyphics were put on. And, it's all lore, and it's all fake, and it's all just an idea that I had driving a truck one night, and I worked it out, and it all fits. I've studied it and went to the libraries once in a while to get the information that I needed to make this whole thing work. In my mind, anyway, and it seems to work. So, wow, I've been talking for a while. I don't think anybody's going to watch this, but if you do, please leave a comment if you got this far, saying the chicken is running loose, and tell me what you want to say about this. And if I'm completely crazy, say so. If it's an interesting subject and it's blown your mind and got you thinking about it, okay, cool. Tell me what you found. I want to know. Anyway, take care and good luck. And the next video we're coming up with is going to be more on my business history and what I'm doing now. And all my failed attempts to get a business going, and now I've got something going. It's not exactly what I wanted, but it's expandable. But it's when I expand it, it's going to change shape, but it's going to do other things, and I'll tell you more on the next one. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Bye now. Take care. Be safe, and we'll see you on the next one.